A rescue operation in a local canyon this Father's Day.
A man fell from the top of a waterfall at the end of a trail today.
It happened just before noon at a waterfall along the Bells Canyon Trail. Rescue crews have been in Bells Canyon all day trying to get the man off the mountain. Fox 13's Scott McCain joins us live. Scott, have they actually gotten him down yet?
No, not yet, and it has been a very rough Father's Day for that individual and for the crews who have spent, as you mentioned, the entire afternoon trying to get him off the mountain. Right over my shoulder, right up over that ridge right there, is where a medical helicopter is right now.
I love my father very much. It's actually hard for me to express in words because, I don't know, love is a difficult thing, I think, to describe when it's genuine and real and very deep. And I feel like my dad sacrificed a lot for me, and I'm grateful for that. When you have a family, there's just so much is going on all the time. When I got the phone call on Father's Day, I immediately felt bad that I hadn't spent as much time as I would have liked with my dad.
Mansour and I have hiked throughout the Wasatch Front. One hike we hadn't ever done was Bells Canyon. So on Father's Day 2010, we decided to pursue hiking all the way to the falls. As we started our hike that day, talked about our gratitude for our families and wonderful grandkids and kids that we have. As we worked our way further up the canyon, we were in a state of exuberance about what a gorgeous day it was. Blue skies, and the creek just was rushing. It was near flood stage that day, and we just were full of exuberance and energy as we hiked our way up to the top of the falls.
The reason why Brandon and I went to Bells Canyon on Father's Day 2010 is that she and I had been talking for a long time about doing a therapeutic releasing ceremony.
Both of us had gone through really bad divorces and really bad relationships that we really wanted to just vent to each other. We wrote everything down, the things that we wanted to change in our life, and just kind of get it out in the open and just have a really peaceful, calm day.
We wanted to really let go of that negative energy and reclaim the positive love energy of life. We thought there's no better way but to go up into the mountains, write these letters, releasing the past, bringing in something new, read them out loud to each other, and then let go.
Jim and I were looking at traveling to visit his father for Father's Day, but the prices kept on going up, and so we decided it wasn't the right time. So the universe wanted us to be here, and my sister had just given me a hiking book and told me what a great hike Bells Canyon is. So we woke up, and on Father's Day, we headed up Bells Canyon.
It was my very first hike, and I'm not a big outdoors person, even though I live in Utah. We realized that it is such a difficult hike, and there's boulders and rocks and everything on the way.
She wasn't used to hiking, and she wanted to give up at least two times on the trail. She tried to give up, and I was like, absolutely not, we are not quitting. And I was like, if you quit now, you're never gonna find real love in life, and so we've got to get to the top of the mountain so that we can get real love. This is all about real love and letting go of this garbage men that we've had. And so we did finally make it up there. We read our letters to each other. It was really a beautiful moment.
We were just in such a space of, gratitude, and that we were so, glad that we were having this opportunity, not knowing what was coming.
It was beautiful that day. The water was incredibly high, and there was a lot of wind, and there were beautiful wildflowers of every color.
As we approached the turnoff to the falls, Mansour opted to climb down to the base of the falls looking upward, and the water was spraying so strongly that it was covering the entire area, and it was a bit precarious just getting down to the rock where one looks up at the falls. Near the top where I was at, I was able to get a pretty good view of just how powerful the second drop was. And as somebody who's spent a lot of time in whitewater, we always think about the scenario of if someone ever were to go off that fall, there would be no likelihood of survivability, just given the violence of that water. I hiked about 3/4 of the way up and was taking photos. Mansour caught up to me and passed me, and he hiked to the very top of the falls.
The water was so strong and so heavy because of the runoff that year that it was really intimidating. I could see this man sitting on the edge of a rock, and he was kicking his feet, he was eating an apple, and you could tell that he was meditating. And I had turned to Jill and I said, "Look how beautiful that man looks." And I said, "Can you see the light that is completely surrounding him?" And we sat there and watched him for quite a while, just in awe basically of the beauty of the surroundings, but also the spirit that this man carried. And we didn't know him from Adam. And that was actually Mansour.
He was so happy, and both of us noticed him right away and just thought, wow, look at that man enjoying life. Like, there's a guy who looks so at peace and so happy and just loving the moment. And we were both amazed and just kind of in awe at the life that was kind of spilling out of this man's heart. And we both took stock and noticed that he was there.
We hiked back down, talked to his friend Rod, his best friend, and just greetings basically. And then we went down and sat on a rock and decided to start our meditation and read our letters to the universe and get rid of the letters and kind of start this new chapter in our lives.
My dad and I share ability of, I don't know if I want to call it premonition, but we can sense things quite often. And a couple nights before I couldn't sleep, I just felt like something was going to happen. I didn't know if it was going to be with my dad or not, but I felt something. And I had gone to church that morning, and I actually came home early because I really didn't feel well. And it's when I was home that I got the phone call.
So we take this as good omen, and we ask God to bless them to have a very happy, successful, prosperous life.
We've been hiking for years together, and he developed a passion and exuberance about doing this kind of thing. And I think that it was within the framework of that passion and exuberance that he was standing here thinking he could get over to the other side to get a much better view of the falls. I heard Mansour yelling, "I'm going to jump." So I immediately yelled, "Don't!" And that's when I reached the top, saw him launching off this rock over to here. Water was spraying up on this angulated rock, and he was trying to get a grasp of the rock and started sliding down, slipped into the creek, and just as soon as his body hit the creek, he was gone. So my immediate thought was, if I have any chance to get him before he goes over the big waterfall, it would be at the first drop, which was estimating 8 to 12 feet.
We see Rod Huck that we have never met before. He's running down the mountain and he's saying his cell phone didn't work and his best friend has just fallen down the waterfall. And I take out my phone and I'm dialing 911, and while we're waiting for them to come online, I told Rod and Jim, help me spot Mansour.
I do remember the call. We were here in station. Our initial response was 2 engine companies.
We got the word that a man had fallen off the top of the waterfall. So we proceeded to grab our gear and head up to the area where we meet.
Jim saw Mansour first, and then I saw the white of his jacket. I immediately handed the phone over to Rod and I let the operator know, and I started running after Mansour, running down the side of the waterfall and yelling as loud as I could, help is on its way, I'm on my way, don't give up. I came to a point where I came close to grabbing him and he slipped and I saw him fall down. So I'm still running alongside the waterfall. And when I round the corner, I see Mansour's body, and he's effaced in the water, and he has his right hand on a log, and his legs are trapped under the log.
I could see him, his body, in the river several hundred yards downstream, and I was yelling. Of course, nobody could hear that, but Jim and Suzanne were already on their way to the creek at their own peril to climb into the water.
I'm running as fast as I can and I'm swimming to get out to Mansour. The water is above my waist. I don't know if he's dead or alive. And I get to him and I'm holding on to him and I start to slowly raise his head and his neck, and he takes the most gorgeous breath of life and blood flows down and the wind's whipping and blood goes onto my shirt.
The fall that he took, that he survived that in and of itself, that most certainly was a miraculous thing. I think that the route that Mansour went was the only potentially survivable route. Where he finally ended up, the water was so cold because it was all snow melt that being in the riverbed, within a few minutes, certainly presented a big concern for all of us of his becoming hypothermic.
I had CPR and first aid 10 years before that, and I was thinking airway, breathing, circulation.
I received a phone call from my Uncle Mana, and I knew that was kind of unusual because he doesn't just call me out of the blue. And I cannot remember his exact words, and I'm sorry, your memory's interesting, it gets clouded with emotion. But my memory is of his voice. And he said my name very slowly, Maddie's. And just from that voice, I knew something wasn't good. He'd been hiking in Bell's Canyon, and his friend's wife found his number in the phone book because they didn't know who to call. And he was the only name with Ariazand in the phone book they could find. He said, a wife called me and told me that your dad's been in an accident. He's going to be life flighted. He's in Bell's Canyon. And that's all I really remember.
He said, there's no hope. And I kissed the top of his head, and I said, there is always hope. I kept yelling for Jim. My boyfriend Jim had to take the long way around because this was his first hike. And it took 5 or so minutes for Jim to come into the water, and he held on to Mansour and began comforting him. And we realized that the two of us was not going to be enough. The current's too strong, the water's too high, and the wind's too powerful.
As soon as I was finished reading my very last word, and Jill heard a scream, jumped up, didn't look at me, didn't say a word to me, and just started running. I had no idea what was happening or what was going on.
And I just immediately got up and started to run towards the waterfall. When I got here to this spot, I saw a man and a woman standing in the water calling me for help, and they were holding another man up. Suzanne was holding up him just by his face, and she was just saying, help, help, we need help, this man is hurt badly. So I didn't think twice about it. I just jumped in the water. It was about twice as high as it is right now. It was a really high water runoff here. And somehow traversed my way across the river, got to where Jim and Suzanne were standing. Mansour had been wedged right up against the rocks, and his pants were wrapped around a log. Like I said, face down, and we couldn't really budge him.
Jill kept going, and I turned around and came back, and then I started doing, talking on the telephone to all of the rescue workers, fire and rescue, and also the life flight pilots.
I was blessed with amazing brothers. I have 3 brothers, and I always wanted to be like them. Growing up as a little girl, we would play a game of superheroes in the backyard, and everyone would pick a superhero with a superpower. And I always wanted to be Supergirl. And if they were gonna climb the tallest pine tree in the backyard, I was gonna climb the tallest pine tree in the backyard. If they were gonna jump off the fence, I was gonna jump off the fence, because I had to match my brothers. To me, they were the most amazing, amazing men on the planet. There was a moment where I was thinking of my brother, James and Burke and John. And if they were here, they would just lift him right up out of the water and carry him on one hand and take him over to shore. I was thinking about my brothers the whole time. Like, I wish that they were here because they are so much stronger than me and could just carry him right out. But since they're not, Mansour's gonna get the second best thing, he gets me.
The people that were there to assist Mansour, everyone just kind of scattered and just took over a position or a job, and nobody said anything to each other. We just did it, and we just knew exactly what needed to be done. And so I don't really remember where everybody was or what everybody was doing, but I just remember that it was very, very calm and very peaceful, actually. Since I have training in being a flight attendant, I also knew what to talk to the life flight pilots about, and also what to talk to the Fire and Rescue, the Chief Battalion, and signs tell us to look for in Mansour.
He was freezing, kind of incoherent, bleeding, definitely damaged and injured. So we started to pull at his pants to try to free him so that we could turn him face up. And they wouldn't budge. They were nylon. And there was the force of the water that was going down that side of the crevice. It was like a vortex or a tornado that was just sucking us down. There's 2 more tiers down, and we were by no way safe.
The log that was wrapped around Mansour's pants was slowly going over the edge, and I was a foot away from going over the edge. And I asked if anybody had a knife. Nobody had a knife to cut his pants. And so I looked at them and I had them in my hands, and Jim said, "You have to get them off and you have to do it now." And by now half of the log is over the edge and they're holding on, and you can see their muscles straining.
So we kept ripping at his pants, trying to find something to cut him with, and finally out loud I said, you know, if God exists, if angels exist, we need these pants to rip off right now.
And I'm ripping, and I get the tear in his navy blue pants over to the seam, and it ripped all the way up, and the log went over. The log went completely over, and the timing was perfect.
And we were able to grab him by his inner, he had a different set of pants on inside, we flipped him up by the belt loops, and then Jim and I started to pull him with all of our might out of this vortex to this little cluster of rocks. And we were about waist deep in this ice cold freezing water that was sucking all of our energy out as fast as it swept past us. And I'd never experienced water that cold before. I had no idea how fast it takes your energy and makes it so you literally can't move.
With this particular call, we had an initial rapid response team, which was the station here, 33, that responded with our personnel, knowing that it was high peak runoff and it was cold. Several things jumped out to me. I was very concerned about hypothermia.
So that gave us an idea that we need to get there quick, and if he was still floating in the river, get him out of that river, knowing that the temperature was pretty cold at the time.
Even a few seconds to a few minutes of being in that creek is just not numbing, but it's so painful, so painfully cold. How Jim and Jill were able to be on that rock with him and endure that, where they were not in the type of shocky state that Mansour was, is just remarkable.
There were only 2 rocks at the time. Jim was on a rock and Jill was on a rock, but their legs are underwater and they're holding Mansour, and the water's rising, the wind's getting higher, and I go onto shore to help with the 911 call.
I was hanging on to Mansour, like cradling like a baby, and Jim was holding his head. So Mansour was propped up so that his face was facing mine. I was all he could see. I was holding his legs and his hands, and I could tell he was fading in and out of consciousness. And from my flight attendant training, I knew the important thing was to keep him calm and keep him awake and try to stop the bleeding. I remember that his arm was flailing in the rapids. It was not connected, and it was just everywhere. And so I was trying to grab his other arm just to keep it from ripping further and doing more damage. I was able to kind of corral his arm and hold it. I just remember him screaming in pain. He was in so much pain, and he kept begging for us to please pull him out of the water, please pull him out. And Jim and I couldn't pull him out. We didn't have the energy, and it was heartbreaking because I couldn't tell him how ill-equipped we were to really help him. And he's looking to us to save him. And we couldn't. We were doing everything we could. It was a very helpless feeling in that moment. So I just did what I could, which was talk to him and keep him awake. I asked him to think about his family. I asked him to tell me what his kids' names were. I asked him to tell me why he was hiking that day.
He also spoke to me of his wife, Scotty, and wanting to see her again, and his daughters, and they were on his mind from the beginning.
There was a few times where he asked us to just let him go. He kept saying, just let me go, it's not worth it, save yourself. And I kept telling him, we either all leave together or none of us leave. We're not leaving you on this rock. You stay with us. There were several times where his eyes rolled back in his head and I thought that he was dying, and I just kept saying his name, asking him to tell me his family's names, just repeating it over and over, and telling him it's okay. Telling him it's okay, help's on its way, help's on its way.
Because of Jim and Jill's personalities, I knew that there was no possible way that they were gonna get out of the water. And Suzanne and I were actually gonna switch them spots, or we were gonna try to get somebody else to switch them spots, but they would not get out. They just said, there's no way. And to just keep going as we were going.
My husband and I got in the car and we phoned my sisters, my mom, and everyone to let them know what was going on. And we were making arrangements to make sure that my dad would be with someone at all points. We weren't sure what state he would be in. We didn't know if he was dying. We didn't know how dire the situation was. It obviously was extreme enough to be life-flighted. And so my sisters and I, we decided that I would be the one to run up to the canyon. It was easiest for me to get there, and I'm the closest to Bell's Canyon. And so I was the one to get up to the canyon to be with him there.
I'm with Bryn, and I see Rod, and he's wanting to know how to help. He's a very good friend, and he's very worried about Mansour, and he's afraid that this may be the last time and his last hike with Mansour, and I remind Rod that we need to be positive.
We immediately came to the mountain, and I literally came in a black skirt, and I think I had a black dress shirt on. I'm not sure, I can't remember exactly what I was wearing, and some little black kind of ballet shoes, and we just began running. We didn't want to miss the emergency personnel bringing him down, and so we just ran as far as we could, and we stopped. There's a bridge where there's several different ways you can come down from the waterfall, and we weren't sure which route they would be bringing him down, so we kind of just stopped there at the middle and began to wait for him to come down. It took quite a long time.
We encountered, in the 2.5 hours we were up on the mountain, 15 to 20 other hikers that would not help us.
I kept screaming for people to help us because I thought, gosh, if we had 10 guys lock their arms together, we could lift him out of the water, or we could at least get him to the bank, whatever. But not one person would come and help us. And I could not believe it. I couldn't believe it that people were standing there videotaping, taking pictures, but nobody would come and assist us at all.
She and I were communicating back and forth, just yelling across the sound of the river, and she told me that no one would help. And I remember that I said, "What?" And she's all, "No one will help." And I remember that I was like, what the? I was so pissed. What do you mean nobody will help? Here we are, literally in life or death, literally barely able to hold on, freezing. This man is bleeding to death. Jim doesn't even have shoes on. We're in a raging waterfall. There's people everywhere, able-bodied people. Bryn is asking for help on the phone with 911 and no one will help? What the hell?
And Mansour said, I'm so thirsty, and nobody would share their water. Everybody said they either had just what they needed for the trip, or they needed it on the way down, or they didn't have any extra.
I was blown away. And then in the same moment, it's like I couldn't focus too much attention on that because of everything else that was going on. So I just kind of surmised all of my energy again after having a total blown away, like, wow, you have got to be kidding me. And sunk it all back into, okay, it's do or die. This is me and Jim and Mansour. It's up to us. We're out here alone. If we fail, then we really fail. Like, there is no Superman. Nobody's gonna come fly down and save us. It really is on our shoulders. And so what do we got? You know, show me what I'm made of.
My dad, for years, had been asking me to do this hike with him, and I never did because I had my kids, and just it was difficult to go early and come with him. And he usually hikes on Sundays, which is difficult for us. And so I was really unfamiliar with the area. So we were very anxious, and we split up, my husband and I, and we kept kind of running along that area and listening and hoping we could hear or see something. One of the emergency rescuers had driven up in a truck anticipating meeting them as well. He was there at the bridge, and he was able to tell us we were in the right spot and educate us on what their objectives were going to be with my dad. He also had a little bit of information, which was really helpful because we were so scared.
Bryn and I kept yelling back and forth to each other information. 911 was asking, you know, how much does this man weigh? What do you think his age is? How badly is he hurt? And so Bryn and I were relaying messages to each other, which we're both grateful we were flight attendants because we had that training with CPR and first aid and, you know, evacuating planes and what to do in case of emergency, where we were able to relay all that information to each other and to rescue crews.
We just kept taking his vital signs, talking to him, seeing how he was doing, and asking, you know, just different questions to him and just really watching him. I know that there were times when he had asked to be let go, and, you know, that Jill and Jim told him, no way, not why we're here. I talked to the first life flight pilot, and we had been up there for quite some time at this point. And the first life flight pilot, they flew over, and I could just remember this huge sense of relief.
We heard a helicopter, the sound of a helicopter, and we looked up and life flight was above us. And we were so excited because we thought, we're saved. It was the best thing that I had seen up to that moment in my life.
We see it in the air, and Mansour is very hopeful, and we all are. We all have that feeling.
But the wind was blowing really, really hard, and I could tell that he was just gonna go right into the cliff. And so I was like, there is no way you can land. There's no way, you know, you guys can just circle around and stay up there. And I said, you know, didn't you bring a hoist? And he's like, no, we didn't know that this was gonna be as dangerous as it is. And so we're gonna have to send for another life flight. And just all of us were like, you've got to be kidding me.
After about 20 minutes of hovering, the helicopter left and headed back down the canyon.
And then we saw them fly away, and we realized that we're not saved.
I had a little brother drown when I was in 5th grade in the water, and I could see my little brother again in Mansour. And so I was just like, here I'm going through this experience again. And I said to the firefighters, that I was talking to on the phone as they were setting up their base camp, I just said, there's no way this man is gonna make it.
There was a moment where Jim and I looked at each other and we realized that it is up to me and him. And if he can't hold out, we all go down. If I can't hold out, we all go down. It was a very sobering moment for all of us that rescue crews can't make it to rescue us. And who knows how long we're gonna be out here. Both of us started to get that like sewing machine leg where your muscles can't really hold out anymore and you're shaking and shaking to hold on. Jim's feet were as purple could be. And we just kept it cool because we knew that if we put Mansour in more of a panic than he was already in, it wouldn't serve anybody.
Then we see life flight come back again. I don't know if it was the same life flight or a different life flight.
And they did have a hoist, but the wind was blowing so hard that they felt like they couldn't, stay in the air safely.
Indeed, they were not able to land because of the wind. And so life flight leaves. And so we are an hour and a half into this rescue.
And so they decided that they were going to go and land down by the reservoir. Pretty much all of us started crying after the second life flight left.
Within 10 minutes, 12 max of us getting the call here, we're on the trail hiking up to him.
We had a fair amount of equipment. Each personnel was probably carrying a 40 to 45 pound set of equipment with them. We're able to drive them up to the lower reservoir, which is where the trailhead starts. From that point on, it's a single track trail.
I remember vividly carrying the 50-pound pack up that hill and my shoulders were screaming. And we still went pretty fast.
He continued to tell us that the helicopter was having difficulty getting him out of the area where he was because of the wind, and they had sent up some other search and rescue personnel to extract him physically. And that was pretty shocking to me to think about the hike and how much longer they had to hike. I felt badly for them. I felt immense gratitude and a lot of anxiety.
I was talking to the firemen. I was basically relaying the messages back to Jill and Jim, and I was telling Jill that they were going to send the fire and rescue, but they had to climb the mountain just like we did, and they also had to bring all their equipment and all their gear. And so we knew that it was going to be a good 2 hours, if not more, before help really came for us.
When you're in that situation, though, you don't think too much about it. You're just trying to get there. You got a lot of adrenaline pumping through you. You're trying to get there to rescue somebody. It's a little bit different than just hiking it on your own.
The Bells Canyon Trail is probably an 8% grade trail. We were probably maintaining a constant 7 to 8 mile an hour pace, short of a slight jog. That particular day was 43 minutes from our initial dispatch to our patient contact.
The officer told us at some point that my dad would definitely be life flighted, and he knew where the life flight would land, which was near the lake. And so my husband and I, we went down towards that area.
There's waves of emotion that come over you when you're in a situation like that, where you feel like you're okay and you can handle it. And then you have these inner moments of panic, like, am I doing the right thing? Should I be doing this? And then you have moments of, I can handle this, I can hold on a little bit longer and everything will be okay. I've seen this in the movies. Any minute now, someone's gonna show up and take this problem away from me. And it doesn't happen like that. We ended up sitting on that rock for over 2 hours, well over 2 hours, waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And the entire time praying that this man wouldn't die in my arms.
Bryn and I hear that the rescuers are on our way, and we're looking and we're looking, and we don't understand why there's such a delay. What had happened is they had gone to the upper fall, and then we see them as they're coming down from the upper fall, and we're like, hurry, we need help. It felt like so long for them to come down the slope.
Several of us ran up to show them where he was, and they came down.
There's quite a few bystanders standing around pointing us where to go.
Well, I vividly remember walking down that hill, seeing him still in the water, thinking, okay, this is legit. This isn't just someone that's minorly hurt. He needs help now.
Me and my partner got in, went over and found him lying there. He was unconscious. They were holding him up out of the water, and from that point we took over medical care.
My initial concern was for the two healthy civilians that were still in the water at that time. We strung a rope from a tree off the shoreline. It was apparent they'd been there for a long time. They were both completely soaking wet. They were both physically shivering. You could tell they were both very cold. They looked pale. As we assisted them out of the water, we were obviously asking them if they knew any specific injuries that the victim might have that they had seen. I believe at the time they thought he had a long bone femur fracture, some head trauma, and a broken arm.
It was risky, to say the least, for anybody to get into that stream bed because the river was so high and raging that people could have been washed down from there.
Help had finally arrived, and the first firefighter threw a line out to us so that he could carabine and safely traverse the river. Then the next couple firefighters came, and I don't remember a lot after the firefighters show up. I remember they got life jackets on Jim and I. They got enough people out there to secure the situation, to get a hold of Mansour, and then they had us hook onto the line and come back across the river.
They came at just the right time. We all said get Mansour out first, but the search and rescue policy is to get out those that have a higher likelihood of living. So they took out Jill first and then Jim.
I took Jim at that point and had him sit down, and I just started rubbing his body. He was so cold, and his mustache and beard and everything had icicles on it. And I can remember not even thinking twice. His nose was running, and just to take my fingers and wipe his nose, I didn't even care. It was just like this overwhelming feeling of unconditional love for all of these people that I didn't know before except for Joe.
He can barely walk when he gets out. His legs are not working. It's like a new deer, like where they weren't his legs even. As they're pulling out Mansour, they took away the sleeping bag because Mansour needed it more, and Mansour smiled when they took him out of the water. That was great, a great moment.
The initial assessment of him was kind of concerning as well. He was not shivering, he was not cold, he was semi-conscious. We applied a sea collar and a backboard on him out on the rock that he was on. We brought him across the river on the backboard to the shoreline and started our medical assessment on him there.
Jill's just this little teeny tiny thing, and Jim had a brace on one of his legs, completely covering one of his legs, and I was just like, you know, there's so many capable, able men standing around that it was just really, really shocking.
When I got out of the water, I was mostly numb from hypothermia. I had to keep balancing one foot on the rock and one foot in the water to hold the position that I was in. I was squatted like a frog, and I was holding Mansour kind of between my legs with one foot up, one foot in the water. And in order to spare one of my legs from getting pure hypothermia, I kept switching feet, in the water, out of the water, in the water, out of the water. So when I got out, I couldn't really feel my legs, my feet, or my back. My body was killing me. And when things started to get feeling again, I realized I had severe hypothermia in my legs, but also that my back was severely damaged. I had like nerve damage and sciatic pain that was just running down my legs. The entire hike down was like pins and needles all the way down my legs, all the way down my legs. And I couldn't sleep. I couldn't get comfortable for days after. But at the same time, I was so concerned about Mansour and his safety and if he lived and, you know, how badly he was hurt. I almost felt guilty for caring that I was hurt, you know, and Jim had broken a couple toes and sprained his ankle really severely. And just all these other people had all this injuries much worse than mine, and there was a part of me that felt guilty for even worrying that my body was damaged.
I went with Jim to get him in the sun, and there were all of these hikers that were rubbing his legs and feeding him gummy bears and brownies. And
until they actually got Mansour out of the water, then that's when people started to offer us sleeping bags and food and all this stuff. And I'll never forget that one of the ladies that came over to help me with Jim asked what hospital we worked for. And I looked at her and I said, we don't work for a hospital, we're flight attendants. And she goes, oh, I'm an ER nurse at a local hospital here. And she said that she didn't think that it was that serious, and that's why she didn't come in and help us. And I just asked her to leave because I was just like, you've got to be kidding me.
We noticed just bumps and bruises everywhere. I mean, you can imagine going off a cliff, just bouncing through the rocks. He was pretty busted up every place possible. So.
We obviously knew he was reaching hypothermic state. We did do a temperature check on him, which I believe it didn't read at the time. So obviously he was very low. We started an IV on him. Our concern was just to keep him warm and get his core body temperature back up. So we applied multiple hot packs throughout his body, wrapped him in a sleeping bag, and loaded him in a Stokes basket. We had to prepare to package him for carrying him down the mountain.
Then it's a very steep climb up from the riverbank back to the trail. Climbing up that hill, that was a very steep hill. The mud didn't help, and so manpower intensive. We couldn't have done it if we didn't have multiple people there with us.
I joined the crew there to take him down the mountain.
It takes about 30-40 minutes, and then to get him from the bottom of the waterfall back up to the trailhead requires a rope rescue system to hoist them up to the trail, which perceivably takes about another 30 minutes. All in all, it's about a 3.5-hour turnaround from the time we've got to a victim and get him down off of the mountain.
I'm a speech and language pathologist, and I worked for several years in rehab and in a trauma 1 hospital. And to hear head injury, I was quite upset and nervous. And I was anxious to see him myself, to see at what state he was in at that time. I was worried that I wouldn't have the dad I had before. Most patients who have a severe head injury and falling down 3 waterfalls, I would imagine would be pretty bad, are not the same personality or the same person again, even after they recover. They're never the same pre-injury. So those thoughts were racing through my mind.
We had to physically carry him the entire way, and that was, I remember that just backbreaking. And the trail is small, we're bushwhacking, going through, getting whacked, our faces are getting hit by brush, and every 5 minutes we're calling each other saying, do you need to swap out, let's change, and so, because we knew we had to get him down fast. We'd have 2 people on each side and 1 in front and behind. And it took, over that tough terrain, 6 people at least to carry it. We had probably 5 more people in addition to that carrying water, shuttling it back and forth to give us the hydration we needed. But I do remember going down, both Sam and I constantly talking to him, saying, how you doing, Mansour? Making sure he was talking to us and seeing if his level of consciousness was changing and if he was getting better or feeling worse. I do remember him talking to us and over asking the same questions. He never got mad at us. He was always just kept saying thank you, and that's one thing I'll never forget.
What I recall is hearing noises that almost sounded like horses coming down a trail, and I knew that he was arriving, and so we allowed them, we made room so they could get through an open area. And then I just saw my dad. He wasn't coherent, and I grabbed his hand. I said, "Bob, I'm here," and he didn't respond. And I was squeezing his hand, and he still didn't respond. And he didn't open his eyes. I asked him to open his eyes, and there was just no response. And then they needed to keep him moving, so I just kept running with him, holding his hand and talking to him. And then he opened his eyes. He said, "Baba, it's Maddie's. Do you see me? It's Maddie's." And I don't remember exactly what his response was at that time, but I remember he didn't know it was me. And I got a little scared. And then a few minutes later, I continued to just reassure him and let him know that we were there and he wouldn't be alone. And I was telling him what was going to happen. You're going to go, they're going to transport you into the helicopter. And when you get to the hospital, Mom is there, Paradise is there, Monty's will be there, everyone will be there, you'll be okay. And then he said, "Maddie's, what are you doing here?"
I remember I opened my eye and I saw my daughter touching my face before I get on the helicopter. And I turned to her and I said, "I told you to leave. What the heck are you doing here? I don't need you." So in my mind, she was, during the whole ordeal with me. Jill is talking to me. "Do you know who I am?" I look at her and I say, "Yeah, of course I know who you are. You're Maddie's, you're my daughter. What the heck are you doing here? You have a baby. Go home. I don't need you here. Just go away. I don't need you to fall in the water." And I'm yelling at Jill from the time I was in the water, in the cold water, till they got me in the helicopter. Now, I don't know how I can thank these people, these selfless people, for the effort, because every second counted.
I think that really stuck out in my mind is how much those bystanders really stepped up and helped out. They really were the heroes of that one.
They were there with him. They're the ones who deserve more credit than we do. They're the ones who kept him alive initially. I remember to this day that how much information, how with it and calm and collected they still were at that point, even in that stressful situation.
When my dad first emerged from the greenery, I thought his rescuers were mainly the search and rescue team. I was unaware of Jim and Suzanne and Jill and Bryn. I did not realize at that moment in time the sacrifices they made and how they endangered themselves for my father. I remember thanking all the rescuers who were with me that day. Even before my dad was brought down, there were a lot of personnel preparing for his arrival, anticipating medical issues. They were very organized and impressive. They were there to assist me emotionally and give me the best information I possibly could. And I was continually letting them know my gratitude, especially because it was Father's Day. And a lot of them
were called away from their families to come help one man and one family.
They got him on the helicopter fast, and before I knew it, he was gone. I just remember looking up and seeing a blue sky and life flight. And to this day, every time we see life flight, we pray for whoever's on that helicopter.
I was very, very extremely lucky. My son-in-law is an emergency doctor. He said later on to me, all the signs that were available to them indicated that you're a goner. And I have to thank for these wonderful physicians that from 5:30 to 10 o'clock, they work extremely hard to revive me. And finally at 10 o'clock, I open my eye and I'm in the emergency room. I noticed the nurses by me and the doctor is leaning over me and the doctor is shaking me and trying to wake me up. And I open my eye and I'm looking at him. He's telling me that I'm okay, I'm in the emergency room, everything is okay. And realized that when I fell, I didn't have any pain. When I was in the water, I didn't have any pain. When I woke up in an emergency room because of all the medication they're giving me, I have no pain in me. So I'm looking at the doctor. I said, "Doctor, I have a dentist appointment. When are you gonna release me?" And he started laughing and he tells me, "Son, that's one dentist appointment you're gonna miss."
I don't even remember running down the trail to get to the car. I don't remember any of that. I do remember getting to the hospital and seeing my family and hugging everyone, and then of course they all wanted to hear everything that I had saw and seen, and I'd reiterate my impressions of my dad's status.
We didn't know very much about his condition at that time, but once we came to the hospital, my brother-in-law was there. He greeted us at the hospital, and he came back out into the waiting room, and he let myself and my family know that it was quite serious. My dad was severely hypothermic. He obviously had a lot of lacerations. His shoulder was completely dislocated, and at that time we didn't know the extent, but it was very bad. He'd broken several vertebrae in his back. He had a lot of bruises and scratches, and we weren't sure if, due to the hypothermia, he would live. We were told to be prepared. His blood pressure was really low. His temperature was around 31 degrees Celsius, and he had a really irregular heartbeat. Later, we were to find out that my father had the lowest body temperature on record and was able to be revived. It's pretty miraculous.
If you believe in guardian angels, my mother, about 10 years ago, was involved in a very, very bad car accident. She spent in hospital for a month, most of it in coma. I had a small version of a Quran that I left this under her pillow. And I remember I would recite verses of Quran for her. My mother recovered. She was released from the hospital. I don't know what happened to that Quran. About 4 years ago, she had a heart attack. She was taken to hospital, and eventually she passes. One of my sisters at her bedside opens her purse and finds the Quran in her purse. Now, a week before my accident, She opens it and she sees there is a picture under the cover of my mother and me when I was about 18, the last trip that they took me to the seaside, Caspian Sea, before I left Iran to America. And she puts it in mail to me. I'm laying on the hospital bed. Scotty, my wife, come for a visit. And she says, here is a letter from your sister. I open the letter and I start reading. And I start crying. As if my mother was telling me, son, you were there to help me when I was on the bed, hospital bed. And I'm with you all along.
I can't even remember how far into the hike we had been. I felt something or somebody kind of run past my arm and kind of hit me as they were going up and kind of like, get out of our way, we're in a hurry. And I looked at Jill and I'm like, did you see that? Did you feel that? And she's like, yeah, I saw that. I didn't know what it was at first. And so that's why I looked at Jill and asked her if she saw it or felt it. And she was the one that said that it was angels that were going up the canyon. Well, after the fact, we found out that Mansour's ma, who had passed away, was up there with us. And so just kind of talking with everybody and putting everything together, we just assumed that it was one of Mansour's angels.
It was a miracle for me to go the route that I did. As I entered the pool of water was so deep that I couldn't reach the end. This feeling came to me that my life again is over. I turned to God. I read the first chapter of Quran.
As I was looking up, I asked God, I said, God, if you want to take me, I'm ready. Then after the prayer, I got totally relaxed. I was a feeling of peace came inside me. I'm looking up and I'm seeing light shining on me. And before I know, I come to the surface. As I come to the surface, immediately it felt like I'm sitting on the top of the water and the current is taking me down toward the bottom of the canyon. But before I know, there was a tree that had fallen from the bank of the river on a rock, and the pressure of the water brought me and slammed me on the tree, and I got caught chest high inside that water. So now I started trying to climb over the trunk of the tree, but the more I pushed with my arms, the less successful I was. The pressure of the water was coming and jamming me on that trunk of the tree. Finally, I was able to separate myself from the tree and create some space. And as soon as I did that, the water immediately brought me under and fell down another 20 to 25 feet. As I was going under the tree, I think I hit my head somewhere and I got knocked out. I don't remember how I came down to the bottom of the river. All I remember is I found myself chest down, facing the waterfall, going toward the fourth waterfall. Now at that moment, I noticed I don't have a right arm. I guess my right arm was dislocated, humerus was broken, and I looked and there was nothing there. I'm looking over my right shoulder and I see a tree laying in length in the river. So I grab that tree with my left hand, and as I'm grabbing that tree, the force of the water pushes me back and takes my legs under the tree branches. Now my head is toward the current and I had a hard time breathing. Now I think I was in that situation for a minute or two and I'm fighting for my life, and I had given everything. There was nothing left. I was empty. I hear a voice, and this voice is yelling, hang in there, hang in there. I'm coming, we're coming to save you. And that was Suzanne Jansen. And she rushes without even thinking, without even fearing anything. She rushes toward me, and then she comes and grabs my back with one hand. Jim takes his shoe off and walks without shoe with bare feet in 50-degree water. I don't know how he secured himself, but somehow he got in there, and with the help of Suzanne and Jim, they were able to raise my head. And I remember Suzanne raising my head and kissing my forehead, and I'm talking to her that there is no hope, and she says to me, there is always hope. And she was the right person for me at that moment. Suzanne says that I need to get more help. So she started walking out, and at this moment there is another angel running toward me, again, fearless. And she comes, and she happens to be Jill Anderson.
So the amazing thing to me is that once we actually hiked Mansour down to the life flight helicopter, his daughter, Madis, was waiting for him, and she was familiar. It looked really familiar to me, and I was like, how do I know you? Well, it turns out that Mansour's daughters went to junior high with me. I sat right next to his daughter, Paradis, in choir class, and then I had art class with another one of his daughters. And so I had actually known and been interconnected with his family since the age of 13. When I went to the hospital to see him, that Paradis, who I sat right next to and sang next to for 3 years of my life, came up to me and she said, Jill, thank you so much for saving my father. He's a really good man and very much worth saving. And to hear that from her meant so much to me. Just, I never thought the girl sitting next to me would have the opportunity to say something like that to me. I never thought I would play that role in her life. Life has a way of surprising us.
Providence definitely had a hand in assembling all of us together, and we all did something that helped to promote survival with Mansour.
It's a very spiritual experience to go through a loss or a potential loss, something traumatic like that. It's emotional and it's physical. It changes you.
We didn't have all the equipment that we now have. Actually, Mansour was the kind of catalyst that we started to develop more of our canyon rescue gear from him. It is normally just been periodically, maybe once every couple of years, we would go respond to help somebody off the mountain. He was really the first one, though, that I can remember that's actually fallen down the waterfall that we had to go rescue in my career. And then since then, we've unfortunately done quite a few.
It's the only one I've personally been on where it really was life and death. For Mansour to make a full recovery, it does mean a lot to us.
It didn't matter that we didn't know the man, because no matter what, we would have jumped in and saved him. It was frightening, it was scary, it was, but it was also really exciting to see how strong and powerful people can really be when they just do something that you really have no idea if you're going to make it or if you're going to help somebody, but you really understand your strength, that it's like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe we did that.
Since the rescue, I've taken courses on search and rescue, swift water rescue, high angle rescue. I was in the law enforcement academy, and now I'm currently focusing on a CSI path, and I would like to be on the search and rescue team again in the future. I've had to put that to the side while being in school. I feel closer to God, and I feel like I've always loved people. I've volunteered my whole life, but I feel a deeper love.
You know, the lessons that I have learned from this experience, there's a ton. The biggest one has taken about 3 years for me to grasp. And it's an overwhelming sense of gratitude, and that life needs to be honored. By following your heart and your dreams, by taking a risk, by helping someone in need, by showing someone kindness, by living life, you're honoring life. That really is the greatest message and the greatest gift that I've taken from this entire experience.
I value the time with my dad much more, and my own children. You never know. My dad's really healthy. He's very cautious. He's a very cautious individual. I never would have imagined something like this. I learned about that heroes are all different types of people. And there were people there that day who you would have thought would have jumped in to help my dad. And they were the first ones to bypass that opportunity. If I ever see anyone in any need, I try to help everyone I can. I have a big debt to repay. So if your father's in a river, I'll be one of the first to jump in.
Whether it's a Sunday dinner with the family, whether it's a soccer game that I'm going in and watching the grandkids play, I appreciate the gift that they gave me. I want them to know that I love them all, I thank them all, and forever I'm grateful to them. And I want them also know that by saving my life, not only they had an impact on me, they also had impact on so many other lives around me. And for that, forever I'm grateful to them, and I love them.